Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this FMB webinar on the 27th of October. We're very glad to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you for joining us and I hope everyone is well. So I'm Hayley Lorimer, Director of Membership Services at the FMB. I'm not entirely sure whether you can see me at the moment, but I'll just keep talking and hope that you can. Oh, the screen just changed. So yes, hello, welcome to the webinar. It's been my pleasure to host most of FMB's webinars since we started doing them back in April 2020, I think it was. So that seems like a very long time ago, a lot of water under the bridge since then. And today's webinar is on a topic that is relevant to absolutely everybody that's trying to run a business and juggle all the various demands on your time. Anybody that's trying to make a living and do a job, actually. We all struggle with these issues. So I know that you're going to find today's webinar very useful. And we have a speaker who's got a wealth of information and experience to share on this particular topic and has worked with many building companies as a business coach in the past and also presented at one of our webinars before. So welcome to Alison Warner, who's our speaker today. Thank you, Alison, for joining us. As we go through Alison's presentation, if any questions occur to you, please do pop them in the Q&A box that you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get through as many of those as we can at the end of the session. And there's no such thing as a daft question, so do share your questions with us if you're thinking something, probably somebody else is as well. After the webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email, which will have a link to the recording of the webinar as well. And if you want to, please feel free to reply to that webinar and give us any comments or suggestions for future topics that we might want to cover. So I'm now going to hand over to Alison to start her presentation. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Hayley, and welcome to everybody who's joining this afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen, so hopefully that is now appearing at your end. I'm just going to flick it onto a screen share, or slide share, I should say. So hopefully
yeah, we can see that.
Great. Okay, yeah. So once again, everybody, welcome to this webinar on the subject of effectively time management. And thank you very much to the FMB for inviting me on again. So I think it was a year, unbelievably, since I last did a webinar. So I don't know where that time's gone, if you excuse the pun. So a little bit about me and my background before we get into it. So my name is Alison Warner. I founded Evolve and Grow Coaching, unbelievably, almost 14 years ago. I can't really believe where that time's gone. Didn't start out working with construction and trades, but that is now solely what we do. So we are a business coaching firm that helps tradespeople and construction business owners navigate problems such as helping them to make more money, helping them to recruit and build good teams of people, and helping them with their organizations. That's a big ask with a lot of clients when they first come to us is, you know, I'm wanting to feel more organized, less chaotic, and to manage my time more effectively in order to grow. So my background is quite different. It's working for these sorts of companies. Pizza Hut, Starbucks, and Pizza Express. So quite different as an industry, but I guess what they all have in common is that they all started out as a one-man band, and what enabled them to grow was having the right systems and processes in place, which includes how to manage time. I remember doing my first time management training, it must have been over 20 years ago with Pizza Hut. And that is definitely a key skill, I think, that's required in business in order to grow a business successfully and to understand what's required when you come off the tools to grow a business, how you should be using that time. I wrote a book called Build and Grow back in 2017 that came out, and this is really aimed at the tradesperson who wants to come off the tools and to grow their business in this industry, and it's available on Amazon. So things that we often hear when clients get in touch is, I'm working really hard, but I don't know where the money is. So often there's real concerns around the finances. As I touched on just there, I need more structure and organization. So they want to feel more in control and more organized. I need more help in the business. So whether that's having a business coach and guidance, or actually starting to employ somebody or outsourcing, but they're not too sure that they can afford it. I'm not sure I'm pricing my jobs right. That I would say 95% of people ask me that when they first come on board. Am I pricing correctly? Something isn't working, but I'm not really too sure what it is. That's another one that I often hear. How do other people grow a business like mine? So that's another top question, which kind of ties in with this one. It's this chicken and egg scenario. Do I go after getting more people first and then get the business, or do I get the business and then look for the people? Very common, tired of working all day and then doing quotes and emails in the evening and weekends. This feeling that they don't really have much of a life. They're just continually on the treadmill. And similarly, feel like they can't leave the business to go on holiday without it suffering. This constant trying to keep everybody else happy, whether it's the customer or people in their team. And sadly, sometimes people say, I've actually thought about jacking it all in and just going to work for somebody else. It doesn't feel like it's worth the effort. So why is this? Why does the industry have these sorts of challenges? I'm sure it's not just construction and trades, but definitely all of the discovery sessions that we hold with people who are interested in working with us, they talk about these similar sorts of challenges. And I personally feel it's because they've been trained to do their job, whether it's build a house or be an electrician and wire a house or fit a boiler. But at no point in their training did anybody say, oh, you know what, if you want to grow the business and come off the tools one day, then hey, that's a whole different ball game. You need to know these sorts of things, how to manage the numbers, how to manage people, and crucially, how to manage your time. So this whole thing of juggling lots of different tasks, essentially, if you have already made that step of coming off the tools, then your role should look quite different. And it's these softer skills that don't get covered in your training that are pretty crucial if you're going to grow the business successfully and not be completely tied to it. So I believe we've got a short poll or a quick question to ask you all at this stage. And the question is, do you feel that there aren't enough hours in the day to get everything done that you need to do? So it should be appearing and on your screens at this point, and you can just click yes or no. So the question again is, do you feel that you don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done that you need to do? This is the reason I'm asking this. This is a very common statement that I hear from prospective clients.
So Alison, I'm just going to
wow.
Everyone's answered
100%.
and everyone said yes.
Whoa.
So they're in the right place then.
So you're definitely in the right place, definitely. And I think the thing is here that we were just talking actually before we came on the webinar is that time, we all have the same amount of time, but it's how we utilize that time, how we delegate effectively, and how we plan and prioritize the use of that time that can make the difference. So let me just write. So it's, as I've been talking about there, managing the numbers, putting time aside to do the thinking that's what's required, the planning, managing the team, all of these sorts of things. I'm guessing were not covered in your training at any point, but are absolutely crucial in how to manage and grow a business effectively. So otherwise you can end up being a bit like a headless chicken, and I'm guessing maybe some of you feel like that already if you've well, everybody has responded to feeling like they haven't got enough time. And it can feel very overwhelming, because effectively you're potentially becoming you're trying to do a job that you haven't been trained to do. So it's a bit like me going out, God forbid, to fit a boiler or to start building a house. I literally wouldn't know where to start because no one's shown me. But I do know things like time management techniques and managing numbers because I've learned from some of the very best, I think, companies to work for. And all I now do is really bring it into this industry. So it's really starting with having perhaps a different mindset. So it's a different role and it's a different mindset that's required. And some of this afternoon's training is based on this book called Your Brain at Work by a guy called David Rock. So I first read this shortly after it was published in 2009. Fascinating book. He basically got a bunch of neuroscientists and leadership experts together, and they literally looked at what was happening in people's brain whilst they're in the workplace. And I'm old enough to remember the days where we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have email, and the pace at which life moves nowadays is so much greater than what it was, say, 20 years ago. And they looked at the impact of the brain having to cope with all of these different things, juggle all of these different balls. So if you just think about the different ways that people can get in touch with us nowadays, it's not just email, is it? It's Facebook Messenger, social media, LinkedIn, texting, WhatsApping, and of course the traditional phone calls, all these different things and all these different demands on our time. And they looked at the impact of something called the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of the brain, and the impact of basically trying to do too much. And effectively what happens is it tires out that part of the brain. So when you come to sit down and do something that requires complex planning, so it might be, for example, putting together a quote for a customer or planning out a building project, your brain just goes, oh, I haven't got the energy for this today, I'll put it off till tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And then of course you end up with this massive to-do list. So what I've done is I've basically taken the first part of that book and put his advice into 3 simple steps. And step 1 is planning and prioritizing. So I think one of the key skills in coming off the tools and becoming a business owner is exactly this: putting time aside to plan and prioritize your tasks. Otherwise, what can happen is you're that headless chicken. You're literally just responding to whoever's shouting the loudest that day, and you fall into that cycle of continual firefighting. So I liken it to being in the passenger seat of the car of your business rather than the driving seat. So if you're in the driving seat of your business, you're deciding how you want to structure your week and how you want to spend your time, which is aligned to whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So which may sound a bit glib, and I know it's easier said than done, but if you start to make these changes, even if you're achieving it 80% of the time, I guarantee you'll start to see the difference in your business. So that's the first step. The second is to create visuals. So what they found was that the brain can think more clearly and creatively and will retain more information if it's in a visual format. This is quite interesting, rather than a linear list. 67% of our brains are visual, by the way. And so the more visual, and I'll give you some techniques for that in a moment, but the more visual it can be, the better. And then 3, crucially, as I was kind of touching on there, it's this removing distractions, managing all of these different things that can get in the way. So for example, you might sit down to work on a quote or planning out a particular project, and you've got your emails open and your email inbox pings. And so you go and have a look and read of that email, and then you may even respond to it. What they found in the research was that is a massive drain of energy on the prefrontal cortex, so that when you come back to start working on whatever it was you were doing prior, you've used up valuable energy reserves. And so you could get to the end of the day and you're just completely drained. So it is a lot of the time about how you manage those distractions when you're working on something that really requires your concentration. So I'm going to give you practical exercises to do for all of these steps. So planning and prioritizing. We're going to start with something called, actually, no, we're not going to go to that first. We're going to, first of all, schedule time for planning and prioritizing each week. So actually get your diary, preferably electronic, and put time aside. I would say generally about half a day a week or minimum 2 hours, and just put planning and prioritizing. Most of my clients like to do this either on a Monday or a Friday afternoon, but it doesn't matter when you do it. The key thing is to block that time out so that you've got scheduled time to work on it. And in that time, you're going to do one of these 3 exercises. The first one being the urgent important matrix. So this was created, I believe, by President Eisenhower, but often gets attributed to a guy called Stephen Covey. If any of you have done any kind of personal development, you may have come across one of his books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders, and Covey uses this a lot. So it's a way of effectively prioritizing your to-do list. So you would take your to-do list, preferably it's not just in your head, because if it is, your poor old brain's going to be tired out, but it might be on different bits of paper. You're going to take all of that information and we're going to plot those tasks into the different quadrants. So we can see down the left-hand side here, you've got importance, and along on the top, we've got urgency, and we're going to go through each of them. So the urgent and important box, that's the top right, these are the things that are most urgent. And how I've developed it a bit further is I say these are the things that you must do within the next 24 hours, and it's only you that can do them. So they're not things that can be delegated. And what you should find is that maybe when you first start doing this exercise, that box is full of different tasks. But as you start using this once a week, you should find that that box becomes less, because you become more organized and more efficient with your time. The second box, which is the top left-hand quadrant, that's the non-urgent, meaning that they don't have to get done in the next 24 hours, but they are important, as in only you can do them. So either you haven't yet got somebody to delegate them to, or they're so important that you would want to keep hold of them. And these are the things that you should be diarizing. Now, the trick here, and this is, I've taken this tool and taken it a step further, is to estimate how much time you think the task will take, and probably add on a little bit extra time as well. So for example, you may have a complex quote and you think you can get it done in 2 hours, maybe allocate 3 hours and actually block it out in the diary. Now, often what will happen is you'll have the time blocked out, you'll have the best of intentions to use that time for the quote, but then something else will happen. Perhaps you get a call about a job and you have to go and visit the customer. Of course, that should take priority, but what you mustn't do is just forget about that task. What you should do is move that activity to somewhere else in the week. So it's not ignored or deleted, it's just rescheduled. And this is how you start using your diary. Now, I've got there, use an electronic diary. I've got a personal hate against paper diaries because they can't be shared, others can't see it, and they end up being a mess if you're starting to move things around. Where if it's electronic and it syncs with your phone, then it's always in real time. And as I say, it can be shared with other people in your team. So that's your non-urgent and important box. The bottom right hand is urgent. So perhaps it is within the next 24 hours or not, but they're not as important. Obviously they're important, but not as important. And so these are the tasks that can be delegated. Now it could be that you can't delegate it yet because either you haven't got somebody to delegate it to, or perhaps you have got somebody, but they haven't yet been trained in how to do it. Or it could be that your business is at a point now where you really need to start looking at outsourcing. So generally, what I say with smaller businesses is that's the first step before you go and employ, say, an office manager. Start outsourcing tasks to the likes of a virtual assistant or bookkeeper, or marketing person. Start to outsource them bit by bit, because then it's not an overhead. It's not going to stress you out as an extra cost. You're only going to give the work out if you've got the money coming in. That's a great way to start doing it. And then the final box are the things that aren't urgent and aren't important. These are the things that we're all guilty of doing, that waste our time. So it could be, and this is a common one, checking emails too frequently throughout the day, because then that means you're continually just responding to emails, which actually can be counterproductive, I think, because if you're really, really responsive, then you're almost inviting others to email you more frequently because they know that you respond quickly. That's not to say you shouldn't, but manage it. So I would say if you check them 3 times a day, perhaps at the beginning of the day, lunchtime, at the end of the day, that's quite a good habit to form. Or it could be social media. Maybe you're spending far too much time on Facebook, checking Facebook or something, whatever it is. Now, a good exercise to do, and I do this from time to time, is to actually write down maybe every 15 minutes or 30 minutes of your day how you were spending your time. I remember doing this way back when I was at Starbucks, because I'd get to the end of the day and I'd think, good Lord, where's that time gone? And I haven't got everything done that I wanted to get done. And what I found was I wasn't managing phone calls very well. So people would ring me and I would end up perhaps having a 30-minute chat with them when actually I could have done it within 15 minutes if I'd just politely said, look, I've got something else to go to. So if you are a chatty person, I work with quite a few chatty builders, and I can see them waste a lot of time by not curtailing conversation. So that can be a big time waster. So that's your urgent and important matrix. The next exercise is I should really try and think of a better name for this, the £10, £100, £1,000 task exercise. And this I learned from one of my first mentors, a guy called Nick James, about 12 years ago. And it's a great exercise to do, to just jot down, again, everything that you're doing and then put a value against it. So your £10 tasks are the things that can be easily delegated. They're more menial, they're low risk, meaning that if they were to be done incorrectly, they're not going to have a massive impact on your business. But equally, if you're spending a lot of time doing £10 tasks, then you could be a bottleneck in your business. You're preventing it from growing, because that shouldn't be where you're spending your time. So things like, I don't know, bank account reconciliations or emails that could easily be delegated, those sorts of things. £100 tasks are things that can also be delegated, but perhaps the person would need more training. So there's a higher risk element if they were to go wrong than the £10 tasks. Those are your £100 ones. And then the £1,000 tasks add the most value to the business and could be very costly if they're not done correctly. So for example, I would imagine things like putting a quote together. That could potentially be a £100 task if you found the right person to outsource it to in the form of a QS or something. But I'm sure you probably want to maintain that face-to-face contact for the business and win the business. And there could also be things here that maybe you're not getting the time to do, but you would love the time to do. So it's the things that, oh yeah, when I get such and such sorted, I'm going to go and meet with that company who could potentially be a great referrer of business to us in the future, but you never actually get round to doing them. Those are your £1,000 tasks. And this is really where you should be spending your time, and then delegating the rest, or certainly working towards it. And this is a form of mind mapping, which I was touching on earlier. So a great place to start is just to jot down everything where you're spending your time currently, and then color coding it, just putting a ring around each of them. So you can see, right, are you spending your time doing a lot of £10 tasks? A big one for the building industry is if you're not organized sufficiently, driving around, going to pick up materials, that is definitely a £10 task. You shouldn't be spending your time doing that. And if you are, I would suggest there's an opportunity to plan and organize your jobs better. I'm sure you're far too highly paid to be driving around as a glorified delivery driver. So that's an example. And then the next exercise is called the 6 most important things exercise. It is actually called that. And this was done from a case study. I believe it was the late 1800s, early 1900s. And this guy here is a guy called Charles Schwab. He had a steel engineering company, and he asked this guy, Ivy Lee, who was a management consultant, to come in and increase productivity. And he said to him, how much do I need to pay you? And Ivy Lee said, nothing. I don't want anything from you at the moment. Give me 3 months and then just pay me what you think it's been worth. So he thought, great, okay. So he came in and he said, just get the team together. That's all I need you to do. And he sat down with them and he said, okay, guys, what I need you to do is write down at the end of each day the 6 most important things that you need to get done tomorrow. That's all I need you to do. And tomorrow, before tomorrow, and prioritize them then in order of importance. And then tomorrow, when you come into work, start with the most important, finish that task before moving on to the second and on to the third and so forth. And anything that you don't get done by the end of today then goes onto your list for the following day. Simple. And repeat this every day. That's all he said. And at the end of the 3 months, he went in and Charles Schwab handed him a check for $25,000. That's the impact it had on the increase of productivity in the company. Now, that might not sound a huge amount of money for you, but to put it into today's terms, it's the equivalent of $400,000. That was the equivalent. That was the impact it had on the increase in productivity, because it focused the team on doing what was most important. I guess it goes back to my analogy earlier around being in the driving seat of your business, actually taking a step back and working out, right, what is most important, rather than just reacting and firefighting to whoever is, shouting the loudest that day. Now on to creating visuals. So if we go back to what I was talking about in terms of David Rock, and they found that the brain much prefers to absorb information in a visual format rather than a linear list, which is quite interesting, I think. What I use at Evolve and Grow with clients is mind mapping. You may or may not have come across this technique. It was developed in the 60s by a guy called Tony Buzan. And you basically, whatever it is you're wanting to mind map, so let's say it's a job that you're planning. So you put the name of the job in the middle, and then everything that you can think of to do with that job, whether it's planning for materials, planning for subcontractors, client meetings, so everything that's involved, Gantt charts in that project, you would have as a separate bubble coming off the central subject area. And what they discovered, what Tony Buzan teaches anyway, is that each bubble, like you can see here, should be in a different color. For some reason, the brain remembers and processes that information far better if it's in a different color. And then off each of those, you've got like analytics there. Off each of those bubbles, you'd have other things that come to mind. And the thing is not to overthink it, just think whatever comes in your mind, just get it down on the page. You can always do a second one that tidies it up. I always use mind mapping if there's anything that is complex that I have to think through that I know is going to take quite a bit of time. And then the third, as I mentioned earlier, removing distractions. So my advice is to switch off your phone. The world won't stop spinning if you switch off your phone. Perhaps put a message on there saying that I'm unavailable for the next hour or 2 hours. Switch off email so that it's not continually pinging and distracting you, and you go and check it and then get absorbed in doing something else. And also go and sit somewhere quiet and tell people that you're working on something and you don't want to be disturbed. When I was writing my book, I actually found I couldn't write at home for some reason, which is where I'm normally working. And I went to a local coffee shop and I'd block out 2 hours. I'd switch off the phone, switch off email, and I would write for 2 hours, get it done, and then go on and do something else. And that worked really, really well for me. So it could be that you go and find a coffee shop, but you go somewhere where you're not going to be interrupted, so that time that you've put aside to do whatever task it is productive time, and one that you're not continually chopping and changing between tasks. And then my last bit of advice, and I've kind of touched on it already, is to utilize technology. Gone are the days of paper. I think makes us much more inefficient, because the information can't be shared. If it's on a bit of paper, it can easily be lost. Or, as I've said before, what I find a lot with this industry is the unbelievable propensity people have to keep information in their heads. It's unbelievable. I mean, my memory is terrible. I have to write things down. When I say write things down, I'm meaning electronically. So utilize technology. Now, it could be that, as I've mentioned already, electronic diaries, which can be shared. It can be a job management system, so that things can be updated in real time and people can have on their tablets out in the field. It could be something as simple as an electronic to-do list. I personally use Microsoft To Do because it syncs with my phone and the computer, and it's free, and you can create your own different lists within it. Flow charts can also be a great way of documenting your processes, which enable you to delegate more effectively and train others. And obviously tablets or phones as a way of communicating with people out on site. So the reality is that, it's 2022. This is the most efficient companies have all of these sorts of systems in place. And that not only enables them to be more efficient and manage their time more effectively, that as a direct result feeds through to your bottom line. So the more efficient you are, the more profitable that you will be. And if you don't adapt to that way of working, you will get left behind, unfortunately. So the 3 steps, just to summarize again: put time aside to plan and prioritize. You've got your 3 different ways, different tools to use. You've got your urgent, important matrix. You've got the £10, £100, £1,000 task exercise, and the 6 most important things. What I tend to find is my clients tend to prefer one over the other. So it's whatever works best for you. The second was to create visuals, and we talked about mind mapping as a way of doing that, and flowcharts as well. And then the importance of removing distractions. So those would be sort of my top 3 tips, as it were, from the webinar today. So thank you very much for listening. I'd love to open it up now for questions. And also, just before I do that, I'm just going to share that slide there. So we've got lots of free tips and advice. We've got a podcast show as well, a video library on my website, evolveandgrowcoaching.com. And then those are my social media handles as well. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alison. I really enjoyed that. So some of those things I had heard before, but it's amazing how you forget over time, and you need a refresher every now and again, don't you? Because the lure of those £10 tasks can be very strong, because it's satisfying, isn't it? If you know how to do something and you can do it and tick that thing off your list.
Absolutely.
To do it yourself, when actually that's probably not the best thing to do if you've got
Absolutely.
someone else who
Yeah,
can do
yeah,
it.
we're all guilty of it, me included.
Mm. So we've got questions coming in thick and fast. You mentioned about perhaps allocating 2 or 3 hours to do something like a complex quote for a client, for example. So one of our attendees has asked, should I charge for quotes, as this does take up quite a lot of time and we don't always win them? What would you think about that?
Interesting. I guess my gut instinct to that is it really depends. There's no right or wrong answer, I don't think. I think it depends on how many inquiries you're getting. So if you're absolutely bombarded with inquiries and you're finding that you're wasting a lot of time going out to see people, then you do need some way of qualifying, and that undoubtedly could be one way to qualify them. Maybe take a £50 deposit, for example, and say that it will come off the job if they choose to go ahead. I know there's a holiday company, Trailfinders, they do that now actually. If you go to them wanting to book a holiday, they take a £50 deposit, but it comes off your holiday should you go ahead and book. If it's a way of prioritizing inquiries, make sure you have a pre-qualifying checklist, so you have another way as well of finding out actually are they a serious, are they your ideal client effectively. So that's another way of doing it. I think as I say, it can be done if it's done in the right way, but I would probably only do it if I was absolutely inundated and had too many inquiries.
Okay, thank you. So someone else has asked about delegating admin. If they don't employ anybody that they can delegate admin tasks to, do you have any advice on that? I think you did refer to that a bit earlier, didn't you?
Yeah, so we tend to find in terms of a level of turnover, it tends to be around 85 to 100,000 pounds of turnover. That's probably the maximum you can take and still manage the admin yourself. And the first step I tend to say to people is do it gradually. Don't rush out and employ a full-time office manager. Take on either a virtual assistant or perhaps outsource your phone calls, a bookkeeper. So it's not an overhead. It's something that can be turned on and off. The company that we work alongside with is a company called MyPA. They're based in Manchester. And they have a team of assistants that can help with all of those sorts of things as much or as little as 5 hours a month. And they're very experienced at working with trade. So that's kind of your first step. And then once your business gets to the next level, maybe around £170,000 of turnover, that's probably the time to look at a part-time office manager.
Yeah. I remember speaking to a member once who had actually employed a cleaner because they were a family business and they'd realised that they were spending a lot of time on household chores and things that actually they could have been better spent in the business. So it's surprising, isn't it? If you think about it, how many tasks your time is taken up with that you could pay somebody else to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Always think, how much is my time worth per hour? That's quite would I pay that much to do this task? It's quite a good way of thinking of it.
So Sean has asked an interesting question. Do you have any tips for day or evening courses for becoming the entrepreneur in small domestic construction sector? I guess that will vary depending where you are in the country. There might be courses available and things.
Well, we have a great one at Evolve and Grow, Hayley.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You've just shared the details with everybody because I guess as well, the thing is with it, the advice that you would give will vary from business to business, won't it? So I can see that.
Yeah, I think it's we without doing a shameless plug in all seriousness, Sean, that we do have a 12-month program called the Build and Grow Academy. It's on the website, and it's priced really affordably. It's 147 a month, and it's a group program, so you're getting peer mentoring as well as going through the material. and you can study that in your own time. We say it takes about 1 to 2 hours a week. So yeah, there's definitely that available to you.
Okay, thanks, Alison. So Steve's made a good comment here. He's asked, some clients can be very demanding and take up a disproportionate amount of time. We've all heard about those, haven't we? And so what's the best way to hold them at bay without being rude? That's a good question.
Right. Really good question. I mean, without knowing more about the context, Sean, I'll answer it and then see if this answers it for you. So again, it goes back to being in the driving seat of your business. So one of the things we encourage clients to do is to have regular client meetings. So you'd have a pre-start meeting at the beginning of a project, and then perhaps meet with them every 2 weeks throughout the project. So what you're effectively doing there is you're almost training your client on, right, this is how things get done around here. You know, these are our ways of working. And in that pre-start meeting, you're almost teaching them, you're training your client on what to expect, how you work, how to get in contact with you, put boundaries in place to say, you know, you can say it nicely and say, look, our contactable hours are between whatever they are and whatever they are. Setting up WhatsApp groups so that you know, you're not getting a phone call, say, at 10 o'clock at night. So you're almost training your client, but then your client knows, yeah, I want to raise that, but I know that we've got our meeting on Thursday, so I'll save it till then. So you're kind of managing those stream of inquiries and training them, and probably what you'll find is by putting that time aside, it doesn't have to be a physical face-to-face meeting, you know, you can do it on Zoom. By putting that time aside, they'll have less queries anyway and less demands anyway, because you're putting the time aside to manage them. I hope that
useful tips there. We do see quite a lot of clients through our dispute resolution service who do expect their builder to be available to them 24/7 whenever they happen to have a problem. So I think that's really valuable. Okay, so someone has asked, how much time should I be spending in the office versus being out on site? Kind of spoke a little bit about allocating a half a day to planning. So I guess that's part of it.
And perhaps to quotes and such like. I think it very much depends on two things. One, what stage of growth you are in your business, and secondly, where your strengths lie. So we use a personality profiling tool called Talent Dynamics, which there's 8 different profiles, and it would tell both myself and the business owner where their strengths lie, whether it is doing systems and processes and more back of house tasks, or actually could they add the most value to clients being out and about, meeting customers, potential customers, managing the team and delegating the rest. So as a rough rule of thumb, once you're off the tools, I would say 2 days back of house tasks working on the business, 3 days out on site mentoring and developing your team. And that's really, really important. But it might be, if you're more of an office person, that you spend more time in the office and you have a contracts manager, for example, that takes that role of managing the team and developing the team. That's a really, really crucial thing in any business, I think. Great, fantastic people don't grow on trees. They have great potential. So hire for potential, but then spend your time training and developing them and bringing them up, to teaching them all the great things that you know, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. So I think final question, because we have been going for 3/4 of an hour now, but someone has asked about software packages for helping to manage time. You mentioned Microsoft to-do list, I think, didn't you? And are there any others that you would recommend for people to take a look at?
So there's so many different systems out there on the market to, what I would say, help you be more efficient, which is about managing your time. So you've got you've got things like electronic to-do lists, electronic diaries. Those are your sort of basic tools. Trello is a fantastic tool. It's free, I believe, up to a certain amount of boards, and that's a kind of like free project management tool where, again, other people on the team can be invited to it and you can communicate through it. Then you've got customer relationship management systems that where you can store all of your customer data and inquiries and market to them. Then you've got job management systems. Now, for the building industry, there's not as many as what you'd have for, say, electricians or plumbers, but you've got Builder Trend, which is American. You've got Let's Build, which is UK based. And they effectively are they're for probably slightly bigger building businesses, but for actually project managing, and they can do everything from helping you with the quoting to Gantt charts. If you're looking for just a Gantt chart, Team Gantt is probably the best one that we've come across, and it's got very user friendly video tutorials. So yeah, those are some that off the top of my head that I can think of.
It's brilliant. Well, this has been really, really useful, Alison. I'm sure that members attending have taken a lot from today's session. It's been really rich and full of information. So as I mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody attending, which will have a link to the recording of the webinar in case they want to go through the whole thing again. And also, we've got a couple more webinars coming up in the diary soon. On the 10th of November, we've got Sarah Fox, who's the lawyer who wrote the FMB suite of contracts, who's going to talk to members about how to close off projects properly, to make sure that you get paid on time and that there are no ongoing snagging issues, which again can be a time waster. And also on the 23rd of November, we've got a webinar about the new building safety bill and what that's going to mean for members. So that's all from us for today. Thanks again to Alison for your time today.
Thank you very much, Hayley.
No, it's been really good. And thanks to all of our members for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks now. Bye.